Greetings and welcome. My name is Steve Muhammad, and I'm the host of The Black Narrative. And we try to address issues from a social and political context, giving it context to issues impacting the Black community. And today we are going to be talking about a powerful project coming out of the Muhammad Ali Center. And so, to discuss this with us today, we have uh, Dr. and Mr. Donald Lassere. And greetings, Mr.
Greetings to you, Steve. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Yes, sir. And let me give a brief description of yourself. You are the president and CEO of the Muhammad Ali Center. You joined the center, what, if that's 2012?
Yep, I've been here 8 years.
Okay. And then your role as the president and CEO is responsible for fostering the center's mission and expanding its educational program, partnership, and other outreach initiatives.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yes, sir. And so we're talking today about this powerful exhibit that you all are opening up to the public. Truth be told, and we can see a little bit of that behind you. Can you tell us about this exhibit? And the boards. Well, I'll let you tell more about it because it's quite a unique exhibit.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's something that we're very excited about here at the Muhammad Ali Center. So the way the exhibit was conceived, it started with conversations that I was having with people in the community. Some of them who didn't believe that systemic racism existed in this country because they didn't see that anyone was pulling the levers. They felt that it would have to be some intentional action by some higher body that would create systemic racism. So, what we decided to do here at the center was talk about the policies that create a system of racism and oppression in this country dating back to the time of slavery. And we wanted to do it in a unique way because we represent a very unique individual in Muhammad Ali. So, given that we were trying to be unique and authentic, what we decided to do was take the plywood panels that was boarding up downtown Louisville, and we were trying to get panels from other cities. And we were going to use these panels, as you can see behind me, to show what was happening in the streets, why people were protesting. And what we wanted to do with these policies is educate our community, educate everyone around the world once we get this on a digital platform about the policies that have impacted Black lives in this country for 400 years. And as one of our board members says, some of these things are diabolical, but on their face, they may seem to be neutral, but when you see how they're applied, that's when they become systemically racist.
Right, right. And you all are in Louisville, Kentucky, and this just so happens to be where Breonna Taylor is also from. How does that relate to the museum, if you will?
So one of the tags that we have on our boards, of course, is Say Her Name, which relates specifically to Breonna Taylor. If you think about the Breonna Taylor case, what you see and what you hear is sometimes half truths, but the entire facts of that situation has never come to fore. And that's what we would want to see happen. You know, a lot of people have asked me, what would Muhammad have said about the Breonna Taylor case? And because Muhammad was so unique, I would never deign to speak for him. But what I would say is I have hopes of what he would say. He would say that for a 26-year-old woman to be sleeping in her bed, to be shot and killed, is not justice, it's unjust. For it to take so many months for it to go to a grand jury and it not be presented factually is not justice. So, what we do here at the Muhammad Ali Center is we seek justice. That's what Muhammad stood for: social justice, ending poverty. But more importantly, he spoke for those people that didn't have a voice. And right now, there are millions of people that are speaking for Breonna Taylor. They want to see justice for Breonna Taylor.
Absolutely. And what are some other names that are on that board and other policies?
So we have, of course, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, Ahmaud Arbery, and the list goes on and on and on. And so let me just tell you about some of the policies we have. We
Yeah,
started the exhibit with Reconstruction, which we subtitled Reconstruction Back to Slavery. Because what a lot of people don't know about the history of this country, slavery ended. But when it ended, what happened is that people and government started putting laws like vagrancy laws, pig laws, that immediately criminalized black men. So they were thrust directly back into slavery right in 1865, 1866. And it was worse for them because they had this system called convict leasing. And one thing you could say about a slave master and a plantation is they viewed the slave as a commodity. Well, when you were in a convict leasing system, they didn't care how they treated you. So many, many, many men died within that system. And it was crazy, Steve, because what happened was you basically freed 3 to 4 million people with nowhere to go. So a vagrancy law said if you didn't have a job that we considered a job, right? Then we could lock you up for up to 5 years. And then we could lease you out to a coal company or a railroad company. Well, let's think about that. That is just insane, right? So that happened all throughout the Reconstruction era. And what people don't understand, states were responsible for doing this. We have on one of our panels a representation of what happened in Alabama. Direct revenue in Alabama rose from being 6% of convict leasing to almost 80% of direct revenue from that state. Think about that. Think about how many black men had to be locked up because of that. Then from there, we talk about criminal justice. Because when you think about black men and women being criminalized in the 1860s, that flowed all the way up through today, right? And so when you think about that, there's a nexus between Reconstruction and the criminal justice system that exists today. As you probably know, and your listeners and watchers know, the police really rose out of what were called slave patrols, which were to contain black people, right? Slaves. And so I heard a commentator say once, the policing in this country isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was incredibly insightful when you think about it. Then we talk about the nexus between housing and healthcare. Now, this may just come as a total shock to you, but segregation in this country after slavery in the 1930s was intentional. The Federal Housing Authority in the 1930s created the practice of redlining. They did it because there was a housing shortage in this country. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to build suburbs, which they did for white people, which contained restrictive covenants that said you can't sell to a black person. And then they put black people and people of color in the undesirable urban areas of states and cities, right? So a lot of people don't know that that was a direct edict from the federal government. So we have black people corralled in the undesirable part of the city, right? So let's think about the health impacts and health disparities that that would cause, particularly when you think about the nexus between that and education, which we show here as well, right? So the way schools are funded, for the most part, is by the tax base, usually property taxes. Well, blacks were living in communities where there were very low property taxes, so their schools were underfunded. Hence, you have this disparity in education. So, you want me to continue on talking about the policies, or you
I
want to
mean,
interject
you could. I mean,
anything?
you can keep rolling because what you're saying is so insightful. And so yeah, you can continue right on ahead
All
because
right.
this exhibit that you're talking about, many of these policies we have never even heard of. Um, the ones that you just mentioned, the redlining. I don't know if you have on there maybe the black code laws or the sundown towns
Absolutely.
and things like that. But yeah, please go right ahead.
Well, let me talk to you a little bit about that. So yes, we do have the sundown laws, right? People don't know that. Okay, let me explain what a sundown law is. It basically was a law that prohibited a black person from entering a locality in a state, a city, or a county. There were counties, entire counties in the North that had sundown laws. And what that meant, if you were a black person and you were caught in that locale, you could be arrested, you could be beaten, and oftentimes you could be lynched. So that happened during the 1860s all the way through the 1960s, actually. And believe it or not, there are still sundown laws on the books. And that was a policy that was implemented at a local level. That was a policy and a law that was discriminatory on its face and allowed to stand here in this country, again, all the way through the 1960s. And I guarantee you that there are still sundown laws on the books to this day. Now, what's interesting is that people feel that these sundown laws were confined to the South. They were more prevalent in the North, right? And I'm going to talk to you about some of these policies that people get confused, right? That they think are just these Southern, these remnants of Southern laws that existed pre-Civil War. Well, we have an example of a territory. For example, Oregon, when it was a territory, had a law in the books until 1926, I believe it was, that prohibited black people from entering the territory. Couldn't even go in there, right? So it's these kind of policies that we want to educate people on. We have another panel that deals specifically with media and how in the beginning of media that black people were basically viewed and portrayed as criminals, right? It's amazing how the media has perpetuated stereotypes. For example, when a person is arrested, particularly a black person, they usually portray them as being menacing, as having no names, as being, shown in the most terrible light you can imagine. Now let's juxtapose this against the way they would sometimes treat a white perpetrator. Let's think about the young man that shot up 9 people in a church, St. Emmanuel Church.
Mhm.
Police arrested him, told his story, took him to Burger King for lunch, and then took him to jail.
Mm.
Now, that would never happen with you or I, right?
No,
Not at all.
absolutely not.
When Trayvon Martin was shot, he was portrayed as a young man in a hoodie, sort of a hood, if you will, which was not the truth. He was a 17-year-old boy. Later, I think it was a couple of years later, there was a swimmer at Stanford that raped a woman. He got 3 months in jail, but all they talked about was he was a good student and a good swimmer, a good athlete. That is the portrayal that the media has perpetuated for years upon years. And so that's another thing that we have to really guard against. So let's take it all the way through the rest of the policies that we deal with. From the media, we go to education. And so there's a disparity in education, right? Everybody knows this.
Right.
But we get a little bit deeper. We talk about policies that have created a school to prison pipeline, right? A
Hmm.
lot of folks don't know, but in 1994, 1995, there was this zero tolerance policy implemented by the federal government, right, which funded public schools. It was designed on its face to make sure that drugs and guns stayed out of school. Now, let's think about this. It basically said we could suspend a student for bringing drugs, we can suspend a student or expel a student for bringing a gun to school. The way it's been applied is in some states, particularly some northern states, a black or brown boy is 10 to 12 times more likely to be suspended or expelled for a minor infraction of that policy. Think about that.
Hmm.
So now you have a 17, 16-year-old boy expelled from school. What is he going to do? Right? The
Right.
statistics bear out. If you don't graduate from high school, the likelihood of you ending up incarcerated, it's exponentially higher. But
Yeah.
it's deeper than that. One of the things that we have from a statistic is 1 in 17 white men will be locked up, incarcerated. 1 in 3, a third of black men in this country will be incarcerated. One third.
Mm.
So we have a panel that talks about the family and the impact that that policy has on families, right? And that is a direct result of what was the war on drugs, the crime bill, and some other policies that were implemented at the federal level, right? So when you put all of these things together and you see that there's a clear and consistent nexus between all of these policies, you will see that a system of oppression, a system of systemic racism exists in this country.
Mm. Absolutely. That's powerful right there. And so this exhibit, I mean, this exhibit sounds so powerful that it seems like it needs to be something that goes actually on tour throughout the United States because I mean, what you just ran down, I just was quiet. I didn't want to interrupt you at all because, what you're telling us basically is that many of these laws that were instituted years ago still impact us today and not so much just do they just impact us today, but we can see how it has a ripple effect throughout the community.
Absolutely. That's very well said. And so, from an educational perspective, what we want to get across is there's an end game,
Mm.
right? And the end game is not to just change the policies around policing, because if you just change those, you still have inequities in education, you have inequities in media, you have inequities in uh, education. You have inequities that exist all over the place. Another panel that we have is called the wealth gap. And when you see that, we have it in charts, that the wealth of a white family versus a black family with the same educational background is 4 to 5 times higher, which is unexplainable, it's inexplicable.
Mm.
But these are the things that we want people to be educated on so that when there's a protest, they are asking for policy specific changes, right?
Mm.
They are asking for specific things to be changed at a local level, a state level, and at a federal level. Because as has been articulated all through the media, that if you don't pay attention to what's happening on the ground, if you don't pay attention to who your judges are, who your DAs are, who your police chiefs are, who your mayors are, who your city council people are, it doesn't matter what the federal government does, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what the state government does. You've got to be at the ground level, at the grassroots level, advocating for change, demanding change. Otherwise, we're going to take one step forward and two steps backwards, which is sort of the way things have been progressing throughout the 400 years of this country.
Absolutely. And so, as we are drawing close to the end, I just wanted to ask you, how can individuals, come through this exhibit? Where is it at? Um, and yeah, how can we learn more?
Well, we would invite all your viewers to come to Louisville, Kentucky, come to the Muhammad Ali Center, spend a weekend here. I mean, it's a great city, despite what people have been saying. It is a wonderful place to visit. We are planning to put this on a digital platform eventually. The
Excellent.
exhibit will be up through April, right? And so hopefully we will get past COVID-19
Right.
and people will be willing to travel. We are within 6 to 7 hour drive of over half the country, believe it or not. So we're centrally located. And the Muhammad Ali Center, I believe, is something that anyone in this country should want to see because it's inspiring, it's educational. We use the legacy of Muhammad Ali to inspire people to be great, do great things. And this wonderful exhibit really is a great educational opportunity for young, old, black, white, brown, what have you, people to
Right.
come and see.
And so, you all are a 501c3 organization. What are some ways that people can get involved and help?
Go to alicenter.org. We are a 501c3, which means we're a nonprofit and we rely on the goodness of the community to support us. So, whatever support that you're willing and able to provide to the center so we can keep doing great work like this, we would love for you to do that
And you all are coming up right on the 15-year anniversary of the center.
in November. Absolutely.
Are
Thank
you
you.
all, are you all going to have any type of event on that anniversary?
Well, COVID permitting, we're going to do something probably on a much smaller scale than we would have done pre-COVID.
Okay.
Um, but definitely, definitely. Again, go to olicenter.org. You'll get information about what we're doing here, the work that we're doing. We have done some unique, incredible things on a local level, on a national level, and on a global level.
And a few more things about the exhibit before we go, because we want to recognize the artist Braylon Reston Resco
Yes,
Stewart.
yes. So he did this wonderful artwork, and if you could see a little bit of it, I'm moving my head so you can see a little bit of it. You see
Okay.
the truth that is sort of the New York Times.
Yeah.
Um, he put a Huffington Post in there and some other publications because he wanted people to know that this is news, right? That this is important, that you pay attention to it. So that in and of itself really highlights the importance of the exhibit. I
Right.
see somebody asking a question, what city are we in? We are in the great city of Louisville, Kentucky, the birthplace of the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali.
That's right. And we are coming up on what, the 5-year anniversary of his passing, right?
In June, June 3rd. Yes.
Sir. Yes, sir. And so, as we close on out, is there anything else that you would like to tell us about this powerful exhibit? And is there any kind of takeaway bags that individuals may get? Because this information is something that you definitely want to just take home and marinate on it and share it with your family.
Right. So we do have a call to action with this exhibit.
Yes,
Learn, right? So we want you to learn about these policies. Then it's share. We want you to share these policies and the impact of these policies with your network, with whoever you meet on the street, because you can just talk about one of these panels for hours when you think about it.
that's right.
And then the last and final thing is vote.
Hmm.
That's our call to action.
Yeah,
Share, learn, and vote.
that's right. And like you said, all politics is local. So definitely look out for um, your interests locally. So with that, I want to thank you. Once again, we are here with Mr. Donald, uh, and we pronounce your name Lasir.
Let's see.
Yes, sir. Mr. Donald Lasir from the Muhammad Ali Center. And we thank you for your time and we thank you for educating us on the center. And we look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to have met you, and hopefully one day we'll connect live.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Thank you and God bless.
Same to you, sir.
And that was Mr. Donald Lasir from the Muhammad Ali Center, and we're talking about that powerful exhibit that they have, Truth Be Told. And so we're going to go right on into our next guest, Mr. Amaha Selassie, and our brother is the president uh, let me just say a little bit more about him that he is a peace builder, he's a social healer, he's a freedom fighter, and a lover of humanity. He's an instructor in sociology and director of Center for Applied Social Issues at Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio. He is the chair of the City of Dayton Human Relations Council, a member of the Community Police Council, and co chair of the MLK March, and the president of the Gem City Market. I want to welcome to the Black Narrative, Brother Amaha Selassie. Greetings, brother.
Hey, greetings. Thanks for having me. That's a little bit of an old bio, so I'm not the chair for HRC anymore, but
okay.
I'm on it, but it's not the chair right now. So, but yeah, thankful to be here, and like, wow, what honor to follow after Mr. Lasir, because I love the Ali Museum. It's like I've been there twice. Took my daughter down there to see it. It's like, yes, it's an incredible resource, like phenomenal resource. I can't say enough about it. So yeah, thankful to be here. Thankful to be on this show.
Right. Yeah. Well, tell us just a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're a world traveler. I'm really appreciative that you found time, out of your very busy schedule to come on and talk about, and continuing on with what Mr. Lasir was talking about, these policies. And but yes, tell us about yourself and we'll get right on into it.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm not an instructor anymore. I'm an associate professor, but yeah, associate professor in sociology. I emphasize health equity and centering at the margins, and really, like, I'm a public sociologist. So my goal is like how to transform the communities into the ones that that the community wants to work, live, and play in, right? So I'm real big on just walking with the people, hearing their voice. We're building a market right now, about to open up in 3 months, called the Gem City Market, which is a community-owned and worker-owned co-op in an area of food apartheid, a food desert. So I do a lot of work around equity and just listening for people, hearing, and figuring out how we can walk together. So yeah, I'm thankful to be here, and I love the idea of I love the title of this, Black Narrative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we have to create our own narratives and define our own narratives, right? And so I appreciate the title, because I think that it highlights the fact that we need to tell our own stories, right? And we need to have our own interpretations for how we understand events taken in our community and world. So I'm honored to be here with Steve, OG in our community. So yeah, thankful.
Yeah, I appreciate you. So we got 30 minutes, and brother, I just want you to break down some of these words that impact our lives. Of course, number one, we want to break down hyper segregation. Now, we've heard of segregation, And we know that
Mm.
segregation is where there is a tier, if you will, where you have an upper level and then you have a lower level. Then you have separation where you have people on an equal footing, but they're in their separate areas.
Right.
So what in the world is hyper segregation?
Sure. Hypersegregation is, segregation that's extreme in nature. So when you're looking at segregation, there's oftentimes 5 variables, like your likelihood of having a neighbor who looks like you. And there's like these different variables. When 4 or 5 are happening, it's known as hyper or extreme segregation. And to me, I think like segregation has to be linked with the notion that difference is hierarchical, so that like when you're looking at the construction of race, right, it was said that like, white is human, everything else is inhuman. And because of that, we're going to distribute and leverage our resources differently according to race, right? Or, gender, class, age, sexual orientation. But like for hypersegregation, it's primarily around race. So then you concentrate advantage in some communities, and you concentrate disadvantage in other communities based upon race, which are connected with the redlining maps, which I came in toward the tail end, so it sounded like you guys talked about that a little bit earlier, which is an intentional strategy. So I think one of the important things to understand is that segregation itself is a structural mechanism that is at the root of all inequality, right? Because what it does is that it pools resources, and then and the pooling of resources and the disinvesting of resources then enables all the other inequalities to bubble up. If you're looking at education, housing, healthcare, access to jobs, transportation, access to food, right? Segregation is a linchpin. So when we're talking about hypersegregation or extreme levels of segregation, like in Dayton, we're hyper-segregated, right? Because we have a river geography divides east from west, and 98% of African Americans live on the west side, 94% of white live on the east side, and then you have a Turkish community, Latino community, and African refugee community. And oftentimes, what started as segregation, or, I like to think of Du Bois a lot, the first African-American PhD and also the first African-American sociologist, right, who said that the problem of the 21st century is the problem of the color line, right? And so like the redlining maps, which created the areas of pooling people by their race into housing districts, then translates today as an opportunity line.
Right.
Areas that were disinvested now lack access to opportunity, and opportunity we would determine as conditions favorable for the attainment of a goal. Oftentimes looking at transportation, healthcare, everything that we mentioned earlier, education. And so there's a direct correlation that across the country, every red line map now has lower levels of opportunity. And it's not even just access to opportunity, but it's also risk. It looks at like how, the things that are undesirable in the communities, they get put in the areas that have been disinvested. What I mean? So African American communities, have not only higher, 2 to 3 times less access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and are also more likely to live in food swamps or areas that are like a hyper, concentrated full of negative things that we don't want to eat, but they also are more likely to have sorry, it's been a long day.
No problem.
Water treatment plants,
Right.
trash facilities, right? Like the things that everybody in the community needs, right, in the region, right? But they get pulled into areas, right, that have been disinvested. And so it's like it's acceptable in these areas. So those communities then have to bear more of the risk that, everybody flushes the toilet, everybody throws away their trash, But in certain communities, like I have the water treatment plants and trash places, which then ends up exposing our kids to toxins, right? Like in Dayton, African American youth is 2 times more likely to have asthma. What I mean? And exposure to different toxins, right? So all these things correlate, which is why zip codes determine life expectancy. you
Right.
know? So it's like all these things pull together. Because when you're looking at, education system, transportation, all these different systems that they construct together, they work together to create these webs that create the advantage or disadvantage, So it's not just like one thing, but all these things working together by design, right, for an
Right.
intended purpose. You know what I mean? So I think
Right.
the power of now is understanding that it is by design, right?
Mm.
And so by design, meaning it's an imagination. So then how do we reimagine where the communities we want to work, live, and play in, and how we leverage our resources to make it happen?
Absolutely. I mean, you definitely said a mouthful there. I mean, because because you talk about the food deserts, which many would call food apartheid. You talk about the environmental racism that as you're talking about with the asthma, with the obesity, with the the fast foods and the lack of access to proper nutrition in our communities. So now talk about, and we'll get into this because this has the creation of race, right?
Mm-hmm.
The creation of race and how it's been used to oppress and suppress darker peoples, particularly black and brown, and then, like you say, relegate these communities to this third class, fourth class citizenship.
Yeah, I think oftentimes when we look at race, the assumption is, so we're talking about like the effects and impacts. We look at people of color, right, black and brown, Asian, etc. But actually, when we're looking at race, we're looking at the social construction of whiteness, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like when we define what it means to be white, then everybody else is considered other. You know what I mean? And so like that's the process that starts the dehumanization, and so it's like oftentimes that part is not talked about, you know what I mean? It's just assumed that like that is what is, right? And so like unpacking race and how race shows up begins by unpacking, how whiteness is constructed. That at one point whiteness meant to be human, you know what I mean? That like everything revolved around that, and then we leverage our resources. Who can vote? Who can own land? You know what I mean? Who can actually own another human being, right? Because if you weren't human, then you were able to be property, right? And so all these things kind of come with the construction of whiteness. And so I think we have to unpack that to really understand, how systems flow today, because race works by scripts, basically saying that once I define and give a meaning, or I imagine a meaning to someone based upon their skin color, then I start saying, okay, not only how we distribute resources, but also what are our scripts? What are our interactions? You know what I mean? So like how I understand myself is based upon how race is constructed. Then how I understand others is based upon how race is constructed, and how we interact together. Those are like the scripts or codes that we are taught, you know what I mean? Implicitly and explicitly, you know what I mean? That keeps race alive, because race is not, because it's not biological, it's social. So that like it's a paradox that like race is not real, but it has real consequences. Right. You know what I mean? And so part of I think the challenge right now for African Americans is how we redefine race for ourselves, right? So that we acknowledge our full humanity. And to me, I feel that the interesting thing about African people is that we believe in Ubuntu, which means I exist because you exist, and you exist because I exist, right? And I can't be all that I can be until you are all that you can be, and vice versa. There's no sense that I am because we are, So like we don't have an assumption that like someone is lower or not human based upon their skin color. Mm-hmm. And I say that to say that like when I look at the move or the zeitgeist in humanity, right? You see a Black redemption to a certain extent, right? That a group of people that have been oppressed are no longer oppressed. But the good news is that like it's not seeking to oppress anybody. It's seeking to like, how do we create true equality, you know what I mean? And like, how do we heal from these historical wounds and acknowledge the dignity and worth of every human being? Martin Luther King said that we would be the Black church will be seen as the answer, you know what I mean? The saving grace of the country, So yeah, I think the other problem I want to add with race is that race then builds structure. So when we're looking at redlining or any kind of structure, you're looking at ideology or an idea, and then the resources that you put to make the idea real, right? So when I construct white as being superior, then I put my resources to, make that real by like how I organize gifts and talents, how I organize and arrange power, right? And so, like, to reimagine these things, we need to understand the underlying ideas. And to me, it's independence versus interdependence. Like are human beings actually independent, or are they interdependent? There's like what happens when one affects the other. Is it really a single garment of destiny? Do we really have a shared future? And if we have a shared future, how we leverage those resources towards building into that. And part of that to me is, focusing in on the house that's on fire. You know what I mean? And what we do to the people who've been oppressed. You know what I mean? Like how we subtermine for ourselves the communities that we want to work, live, and play in.
Yes, sir. I mean, this is beautiful. I mean, because you're really breaking this down in a way that people can really understand, race. And can you go just a little bit? I want to push you just a little bit more in that direction, because race, now this construct, right? This violence, this what would we call it? Structural violence. The structural violence has made both the predator and the prey mentally ill, right? So now, can you talk a little bit about how it has affected us? Because we know how it's affected them, because we see it every day in the Oval Office, right? But how has it affected us as a people and our interaction with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, internalized oppression. I mean, one of the first things that comes to my mind when I hear you say that is Carter G. Woodson, when he says that, we've gone to the back door so much that they don't even tell us to go to the back door anymore. We just automatically just go on to the back door, know. And so we don't trust each other the way that we could. We don't, leverage our resources together as we could. We don't, I mean, doctors experience all the time. They're like, sometimes like, oh no, I need somebody else to verify that it's okay before, be like, our word is questioned. You know what I mean? Like our competency is challenged, and all these things are internalized inferiority. That's why I appreciate what is it called? I can't think of the name right now, but the group that comes together and they say defy the lie and embracing the truth. You know what I mean? Talking about the healing circles, right? That are emerging. I think the community healing network or something like that. But like we need to defy the lie. You know what I mean? That's why I think a lot of this comes down to narrative, right? Because we're looking at discourse, right? Meaning that like how we define things and then how that shapes reality. You know what I mean? That like the narrative is just like it's critical. And even like I've heard myth being seen as like our tool. You know what I mean? Like how we define and like how we have our own myths, right? Our own understandings, right? Like it's really like our tools for liberation. You know what I mean? So it's like how we construct these things is important, right? Because they have ramifications as far as structure. And when you're mentioning structural violence, it's like once you build the system, then how the system operates against humans is the structural violence, right? Where, like you mentioned before, the diabetes, the hypertension, the overweight, all these things are a product of areas that are disinvested, so they call it a weathering effect, you know what I mean? Because it trickles down and you have this thing called allostatic load, which is looking at, how a 40-year-old body of an African-American woman, let's say, will have like a body of a 50-year-old. You know what I mean? Because of the weathering effect, you know what I mean? From the stress, from all the other things that they have to do, it accumulates in the pools in our body. And you can look at epigenetics. I mean, like there's so many levels to go down that rabbit hole,
And then, I mean, because I just wanted to veggie back, right, off of what you're saying with the weathering. And then now you're seeing this high rate of maternal and infant mortality, not just infant mortality, but now mothers dying in pregnancy. And it doesn't matter their economic status or level. And then you have the increase of suicides among our young people. And so we see that our 400 plus years of being under this system, this systemic and institutional racism, is really just like a fish being out of water, and we're suffocating under this system, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it's so for epigenetics, you need 2 generations. Like when a gene is switched, it takes 2 generations to unswitch it, right? And so the reason why the economic level oftentimes doesn't matter is that it takes the 2 generations of not having the stress to do it. So like, Oprah Winfrey, she has a lot of money, but she's still more likely to die in birth and to have experienced infant mortality within the first year of life because she grew up in poverty. And so there's definitely a correlation of like how our areas have been, I would like to say, dehydrated. You know what I mean? And now it's like how do we bring water to the areas? You know what I mean? The dry bones. You know what I mean?
Right,
And how to build the environment that we need to thrive and to flourish.
So yeah, definitely we want to then go right into some solutions, because we definitely our problem that you've outlined for us is something that many of us don't even recognize, and that is how it affects us. You talk about the epigenetics, right? We're talking literally about the genes, you know what I'm saying, about genes and DNA, being cells or genes being switched on and switched off, and how that affects us through generations.
Right.
And so now let's look at what an equitable community looks like. How can we begin as a community to build a strong community? Because, for instance, we see our people right now, we are hysterical almost over this coming up election, in a way that we don't see that hysteria, for instance, in China, the Chinese people or other people. I mean, they might have some degree of anxiety, but not to the level that we do.
Right. Yeah. For me, I think it's about being a thermostat and not the thermometer, right? Because the thermometer reads the temperature in the room, but thermostat dictates the temperature in the room. So I think, we have to, be determining the future of our own communities. And that's why I like this notion of collective hope, because collective hope is where we build a shared vision of the community we want to work, live, and play in, and then we leverage our resources to make it happen. So to me, like the Gem City Market is a good example, right? Like the area that had is food apartheid, and I say apartheid instead of desert because desert implies a natural phenomenon, but apartheid acknowledges that it was a structural mechanism that made it happen. And if human beings imagine it, then they can reimagine it, right? And so the community came together, 40,000 people, no grocery store, within our limits. You got to take 2 buses to get to the grocery store, and so, we tried to be an answer, by leveraging our resources. So we're about to open up in January. We're going to have a health clinic inside. We're going to have a teaching kitchen. We're going to have a community room, but I think it's about leveraging our resources. And so part of that comes to building trust, because, trust is what enables cooperation or collaboration. Some people call it social capital, right? But either way, it's like without trust in deep relationships, being relational instead of transactional, we won't be able to leverage the capacity of our community. So it's going to take healing our wounds, and to me, it's like expanding our we. Like I think we end up in these segments because, we don't understand the power of we, and so to me, like part of interdependence is knowing being cooperative, and like how do we really pull, and for African Americans, that's how we survived, right. Even in Dayton, there's mutual aid societies and mutual trust societies, right? So it's like, we out of necessity have always had to cooperate, pool our resources to make it happen, right? And so, but we've kind of lost that over the years, and we need to get back to me personally, I think we need to get back to models where we're working collectively, right, towards determining our future and leveraging our power, so that we build the communities that we want to work, live, and play in.
Yeah, I think it was Still Post that talk about recapturing our culture, right?
Recapturing our culture. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
recapture. I wish we could play that right now. I
Yeah,
love that song, man. And
right.
so, that's one of the things, though, isn't it, brother? Is that we have to, like you said, reimagine. But what we have to do is we have to recapture, literally recapture our culture, because culture, right, is a way that people relate to each other, right? A way of solving problems and code and conduct, right?
Yeah, you know what? Like I could talk hours about culture and the power of culture, because culture is so deep, right? Because it not only it informs how we see ourselves and each other, but it informs how we interact with each other. It informs how we understand the world, right? Like everything comes down to culture and the symbols that we're creating. So part of, to me, the narrative is actually defining our culture for ourselves, right? And you see that happening, Black girls magic. I can't remember what Shaq had one for boys lately. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's like, redefining for ourselves, right? And realizing that culture is a weapon, it's a tool. That's why, some countries, the first thing they do when they try to colonize is that they strip you of your culture, right? That you lose your bearings, that you don't know what is what. So then you start feeding into whatever else is given to you. So like, the strategy of colonization was you strike culture right away, because like His Majesty says that the basic struggle of the world today is for the minds of men, right? And so like if you have someone's culture, then you got them. You know what I mean? Right. Like no doubt about it. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And so part of our liberation, I think, is about defining our culture for ourselves, right? And I think it's being, for me personally, it's being cultural relative, in the sense that it's like, I don't know if anybody's culture is necessarily greater than the other. You know what I mean? And so it's a lot of people develop their culture according to what they need, and seeing that as part of a human story. And so I think I personally think that we got to reframe. I don't, like when Audre Lorde talks about dismantling the master's house with the master's tools, I look at like where are the underlying assumptions that's been used to oppress us, and in the process of our liberation, how we change the process of liberation, so that we maintain everybody's humanity in the process of our own liberation.
Right. That's heavy, brother. That's heavy. And so as we begin to close this on out, we definitely want to talk about the co-op, right? How I mean, you touched on it. We talk about the Willie Lynch syndrome, with the distrust and the envy and the jealousy, right? Yeah. Now you talked about trust, but take us in, and we'll close this on out. But take us into the cooperation, right? Take us into how, for instance, the Gem City Market came to be, because this was a community effort, with each individual in the community able to give to that and have some type of ownership.
Yeah. So it's community owned, and it'll be worker owned when we open up. And yeah, right now I think we just crossed 2,900 members. Right. And we're continuing to grow. Like, everybody puts in, everybody can shop there regardless. But if they want to be part of like controlling like what it is and owning it together, shares are $100. If you're on subsidy, a share is $10. Or if you live within a trade area, a share is $50. But I think what makes our process unique is the highly participatory, from naming of the market, from designing the architecture. The community was engaged and involved in each process, because that's how we start realizing our power. Because see, hope comes in by knowing that we have the power to make change. Right, that we're not stuck in where we are now, but we can change it. And so throughout this whole process, it's been like a small version of the hope that we're trying to build in our community. That, like we said, okay, the market, it's the biggest thing I've ever worked on, but as far as like community transformation, it's a drop in the bucket, right? So like what are we going to do next, right? So even within the market, we built a co-op incubator. Right. And then last week we just launched, we had a graduation ceremony for 8 other groups of people who created co-ops. From a doula co-op, the heart call-up co-op, which is looking at how to heal wounds and create dialogue. There's another food co-op that came together. That's going to go deeper inside of the food desert, right? And we got this new class coming. So part of it is like how do we keep building this notion of cooperation more, right? That like we're stronger together, right? And how we leverage our resources, you know. So I mean, I continue to challenge the notion, you know, of like that we have to be survival of the fittest, right? Like I just challenge it on every turn, because I think like that divide and conquer keeps people in power, right? And so like what are we doing to build something that works for us and by us, right? And co-ops have been the model throughout history. I mean, there's a whole book called Collective Courage that explains how, like, from funerals, you know, I mean, everything we did cooperatively back in the day because we had no choice. You know what I mean? So like why leave a model that's working that worked before, and why not continue to expand it out today?
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate that. And for instance, you know, you want to look at, for instance, the little me and the big we, right? The little I and the big us. And so, like you said in the Quran, and I'll end just with this though, you know, that in the Quran it says, and we did this and we did that. And in the Bible, it says, let us make man. So, like we said, this was something that, you know, before we were brought into slavery, because one of the things I like that you say as well, when if anyone ever can, and we'll ask you about your lectures, is that you like to say that not that the individual was a slave, right? But enslaved. Enslaved.
Yeah.
The words are powerful, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. And that, you know, language precedes community transformation, right? So when I say enslaved, it says that, you know, someone was in a state of slavery, but it's not who they are, right? When I say food apartheid, is acknowledging that it's a structure. So all these things are like language precedes transformation. And that's why, you know, I think I connected with even the power of myth, right? So like part of me of narrative development is us developing our own language of how we work and move and construct our world, because language is how you construct reality, right? And so it's like how all these things come together. And yeah, so like, you know, there was a knowledge that was pre-African. That's why even Sekou Touré, who was a leader in Africa, right? Like upon liberation, he said that we need to re-Africanize Africa, right? Because it had been so colonized that like that even Africa had lost its way of how we see the notion, like what it means to be a village, right? And that's why I appreciate what we're doing here locally with the African American Elders Council, right? That like we're moving to how do we build a village, you know? So I'm saying that to say, instead of saying community, say village, right? Because village, you know, community, we have all these ideas of what that means, right? But when I say village, oh, what is a village? You know, how does a village operate? What does it function? What does it look like? You know, so it opens up our minds to explore new possibilities, right? That we can truly create something where the Watotos, the youth, and the elders, right, are in the center, right? And we're building everything else around that, you know what I mean? We're protecting our youth and our elders, you know what I mean? And in that, you know what I mean, we build a strong community or a strong village. Right.
And so as we close out, just let those who are watching know how they can learn more about the Gem City Market and the co-ops that are in Dayton, Ohio, and what they may be able to do in their own city if they wanted to contact you and put something like that together.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we're helping support, I would say, you know, co-op development in a couple other cities around the country right now. And, you know, if you want to find out more Gem City Market, it's at gemcitymarket.com. And you can reach out to us there. You know what I mean? If you send out an email and you tag me on it, then, you know, they make sure I get it. Yeah, I just want to encourage everybody to look for solutions. Like, you know, like the land that they bought down Atlanta right now that they're building into a community, you know, like I think it's realizing the power and the zeitgeist of now, you know, and like how we can really, you know, build the future that we're trying to see, you know, and walking it out. I'm just real big on being the invitation. So instead of waiting for other people, it's like I'm gonna step in that space, and if people feel it, we can walk together. And if not, I mean, that's cool too, but you're not going to stop my movement, you know? So
that's right. Well, brother, I really appreciate it. Cause like I said, you're a busy man, and you know, I understand that you just came from teaching. Is that right?
Yeah. We did a 2-hour lecture on. We talked to all the superintendents in the area. We're on a call, and we were talking about how to build more equity inside of curriculum. So I hopped off that into this, but when Steve calls, you respond, right? So I appreciate it, Steve. You know what I mean?
Man, I appreciate you, brother.
I always got you. That's real.
Hey.
So, thank you for the opportunity. It's my honor and privilege to be here today.
Hey, it's been a good conversation, brother. And, we just touched on, as they show you the picture of the iceberg, right? We just touched on what you can see on the surface level, right? So we definitely will have you on here when you have time available, to go more into these dynamics, you know what I'm saying? Because people really do need to understand how they operate and affect their lives. So
sounds good. Yeah, I'm definitely interested.
Well, thank you, brother, and I look forward to talking to you here in the near future.
Cool.
And God continue to bless you, brother, and be safe.
Amen. You as well. All right, have a good day, everybody.
So, brothers and sisters, 2 powerful guests going into the policies, right? Into some of the systemic racial violence, really, that we have to live under daily in America. And so we're already, as we just talked about, we're already hyper segregated, so I urge you to look in to Project Separation. Go to Project Separation, type it into your browser, and learn more about that, because we're not going to be healed of these ills that we're being affected by on a mental, a spiritual, a genetic level, on all levels. We're not going to be healed under this system. We have to separate and do something for ourselves and recapture, as we were talking about, our culture. So with that, I want to invite you all to follow us. Follow us on Facebook. Please leave comments in the comment section below. Go to National Network View. You could type that into your browser and follow us there. And with that, I want to say, may God continue to bless you and your family with the light of truth and understanding. God bless.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Let's have a discussion. People have questions. They would like answers. Let's talk about the issues. Confront the things that may be difficult to address. The Black narrative.